Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's great to be back here today. As Chrissy mentioned, we spoke last year, and it's fantastic after an amazing year of progress in our company to be able to share a bit of an update and to talk through some of the great work we've been doing in Kazia. So for those who are new to the company, I really want to just summarize a little bit about what we do and just to give you an overall flavor of the company. There's really 4 things that I want you to take away from the next 15, 20 minutes. And there are these points here. We're a company that's focused primarily on brain cancer. Our work is centered around brain cancer. And brain cancer is really one of the last frontiers in the treatment of cancer. We've made enormous progress in breast cancer, in lung cancer, even in melanoma. Things like prostate cancer now are almost a chronic disease, but we've made so little progress in brain cancer. And this is a disease that still affects hundreds of thousands of people every year and has very few treatments available. So we're trying to change that. We're trying to bring new treatment options for patients there with this very, very challenging disease. Now, our lead drug has the less than catchy name GDC84. And this drug has come out of a company called Genentech. We didn't develop it ourselves. We licensed it in from Genentech. And for those who don't know Genentech, it is an American biotech company. It's wholly owned by Roche, Swiss pharmaceutical company. And it is the most successful developer of cancer drugs ever. They sell about $36 billion a year of commercial products, and they've had an enormous impact in the treatment of many forms of cancer. They decided after developing this drug to a point that they weren't going to focus strategically on brain cancer, so we were able to bring it into Kazia. But it has, because of that, an incredible pedigree, and it's had tens of millions of dollars invested in it by Genentech. And I think that shows through in the quality of the data. And we have a lot of work going on. As you'll see in a moment, we have 4 clinical trials with this drug active right now. So each of those are generating data, each of those in different forms of brain cancer. I'll talk through those in a little bit. So we have a lot of work going on, a lot of it generating value-driving milestones for the company. And we also have some money in the bank. We are funded through to the end of calendar 2019. We completed a very successful institutional placement late last year. So we're not here today in extremis to pass the collecting tin around. We're here to share the story and talk through what we're doing. And so just to give you a flavor of brain cancer and why this is so tough, if we look by comparison at lung cancer, in the last 10 years or so, there have been no less than 20 new drugs for lung cancer approved by the US FDA. And each of these in different kinds of lung cancer have made a huge difference to the treatment of patients. In brain cancer, there have been none. There's been nothing in the last decade. And in fact, if we look back over the last 30 years, there's only really been a couple of new drugs made available to patients. So this is the very, very definition of an unmet medical need. These patients are crying out for new treatment options. And as I say, that's really what we're trying to do in Kazia. So just to give you a flavor of the spectrum of our activities, it's important just to say up front that there's really 2 main forms of brain cancer. There is primary brain cancer, which is brain cancer that starts in the brain. It originates in the brain. And then there's secondary brain cancer, and that's brain cancer that spreads to the brain from somewhere else in the body, sometimes breast cancer, lung cancer, skin cancer, all kinds of different cancer can spread to the brain. And we're working across both. We've got activity across the whole spectrum of brain cancer. So one of the studies we're doing is in glioblastoma, which is the most common and the most aggressive form of primary brain cancer. And I'll say quite a bit more about that in a few moments, but that's a phase 2 human trial. And for those who are expert biotech investors in the room, you'll be familiar that there's 3 phases to human trials, 1, 2, and 3. So we're well advanced. This is not something that's still on the drawing board. It's not something that's still in the laboratory. This is a mid-stage human trial program. So very, very exciting work, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a few moments. We also have a study going on in a childhood brain cancer called Dipg. And this is a truly horrible disease. It's something that thankfully only affects about 400 or 500 kids a year, but it typically affects children between the age of about 3 and 12 years of age. It is uniformly fatal, and there are no drugs whatsoever available for this disease. So we're really proud to be working with St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, one of the premier children's cancer hospitals in the world, to test our drug in this form of childhood brain cancer. And that study is ongoing right now. We've also been doing some laboratory research with a team at the University of Newcastle, just down the road from here. And there's actually been quite a lot of media coverage in the last few weeks that work was touched on, in fact, just this morning on Channel 7's Sunrise program. So we're working both in the laboratory and in human trials to see if we can make a difference here. Meanwhile, in secondary brain cancer, or what we sometimes call brain metastases, again, this is cancer that's spread to the brain from elsewhere, we've just joined a really exciting study that I'm going to say more about later, also a phase 2 study that's looking at brain cancer that's spread from anywhere else in the body. And then finally, we've got a study going on at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, which is really the teaching hospital of Harvard Medical School, looking at breast cancer that is spread to the brain. So 4 clinical trials, all active right now, all in the United States under the oversight of the US FDA, all of them recruiting patients, all of them generating data. And as a doctor myself, I honestly think this is one of the most exciting cancer portfolios that I've worked on. But as a CEO of a listed company, what's also really exciting is that we're only actually funding one of these studies, the glioblastoma study. The other 3 are all being primarily funded either by the hospitals or by the US National Cancer Institute. So we really have a sort of 4 for the price of 1 arrangement here. 4 great clinical trials, but only one of them that's being done on Kazia's dime. And we've been hitting all our milestones like clockwork over the course of these programs. We've generated all the key things we've said we were going to do over the last 18 months. But the real money shot is later this year, because we'll be reporting data from our own glioblastoma study. We also actually have a second program in ovarian cancer, which I'm not going to talk too much about today in the interest of time, but we'll also be reporting data from that later this year. So we have efficacy data from human trials for 2 of our programs coming out later this year. And as you'll know, that's really what moves the needle for a biotech stock. Just a word about glioblastoma. As I say, it's the most common and the most aggressive form of primary brain cancer. It is one of the worst cancers known to modern medicine. Untreated, it has a survival of about 3 to 4 months. And with best available care, that's still only about 12 to 15 months. And I've shown here on the slide some of the names that have been affected by this disease over the years. Senator John McCain recently in the United States, but here in Australia, people like Matt Price, the ABC TV presenter, Chris O'Brien, a very eminent cancer surgeon. This is a disease that can really affect anybody at any stage in their life. And there is really one drug available for newly diagnosed patients. It's a drug called temozolomide. And this drug has been around for 20 years, and it only works for 1 out of every 3 patients. So if you're in the lucky 1/3 of patients who respond, this drug will extend your life by about 6 or 7 months. But for the other 2/3 of patients, it offers no real benefit whatsoever. And so we're developing GDC84 for the 2/3 of patients who will never respond to the only available drug. Now, our drug works by a particular kind of mechanism called PI3K inhibition. I'm just going to detour a little bit into the science here. One of the things that's really happened in cancer treatment over the last 20 years is we used to treat cancer by poisoning it with chemotherapy drugs. These days, we tend to try and target very, very specific biological processes in the cancer. And that way, we reduce a lot of the side effects, a lot of the toxicities that we've seen in the past. Our drug targets a biological control mechanism called PI3K. And this is important to a wide range of cancers, but it's switched on in about 90% of glioblastoma patients. And it's kind of like getting the accelerator pedal on your car stuck down. It just causes the tumor to race ahead. And our drug switches that off and thereby stops the tumor from growing. Now, the reason I talk about this, the reason I wanted to bring this to your attention is that there are 4 PI3K inhibitors that have already been approved by the US FDA. The most recent of these was approved by Novartis just a couple of months ago for the treatment of breast cancer. It's a drug called Piqray. And so this is not something outlandish and experimental and speculative and untested. This is mainstream cancer therapy. This is absolutely standard treatment of many kinds of cancer now. But the unique thing about our drug is that it has the ability to penetrate the so-called blood-brain barrier. And none of the other drugs of this type are able to do this. We know that for most drugs, they're not able to get into the brain. There's this mechanism called the blood-brain barrier that stops them from entering the brain. But our drug has been specifically designed to cross the blood-brain barrier, and therefore it's the only PI3K inhibitor that really has any chance of being useful as a brain cancer drug. So we've got a really nice balance between a very well-proven science, but a unique differentiating feature for our drug. And I'm going to skip ahead in the interest of time here, but just to say that this is not a drug that's still on the drawing board. This isn't something that's still in the lab. This has been in over 70 patients now, including a number of children. And so we're starting to understand it really well, and we're seeing some very promising evidence of efficacy. And you can see here some pointers of that. You can see in the left-hand image, this dark area is tumor. And I think if you squint carefully, you can see in the right-hand image that a lot of that has cleared up. And that's really what success looks like for a drug in brain cancer. So we've got some really strong signals that our drug is active, it's having an effect on the tumor. And if that's borne out in some of the studies we're now doing, we think we're going to have a really exciting new contribution to the treatment of this disease. And as I say, our focus has been on glioblastoma, but some of the other studies we're doing are really quite groundbreaking. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit for a moment about this Alliance study, which we just announced a month or two back. This is being done in collaboration with some really top-notch partners. And they're looking at cancer that has spread to the brain from anywhere in the body, any primary tumor. They genetically analyze the cancer, and if it has this PI3K pathway switched on, patients get our drug. If they have other genetic mutations, they can get a drug from Eli Lilly or a drug from Roche. And so it gives a sense, I think, just that visual of us alongside Lilly and Roche. Lilly's a $100 billion market cap company. Roche is a $200 billion market cap company. And I think this really represents, for my mind, the moment where we've been invited to sit at the grown-ups table in the global fight against brain cancer. So really, really exciting leading-edge scientific study. As I mentioned, it's funded by the US National Cancer Institute. It's being run by a leading group of academics called the Alliance for Clinical Trials in Oncology, and it's been led by a professor at Harvard Medical School, Professor Priscilla Bastianas. So this is the kind of caliber of work that's going on in the GDC84 program, and it's part of the reason we're so excited. Of course, it's not just about science. We need to build a business here. And glioblastoma is our path to market. We think that's our fastest, most efficient shot to a commercial product here. And that's a very substantial commercial market, conservatively at least a $1.5 billion a year market worldwide. But beyond that, there is opportunity in these other forms of brain cancer. And then even beyond that, there's opportunity in these other kinds of cancer that people have been using PI3K inhibitors in: breast cancer, lung cancer, and so on. So we think that GDC84 has real blockbuster potential, and we're looking forward to driving that as quickly and effectively as we can. I'll just say a word about our other program, Cantrixil, which is being developed for ovarian cancer. This is currently in a phase 1 clinical trial, but again, we've been seeing some really good evidence of activity here, and this is a scan from one of these patients. You can see on the left here, this is a little little piece of ovarian cancer here in the pelvis, and on the right, it's not too difficult to see that this has largely disappeared. And so we've seen a few cases now of patients showing this kind of evidence of activity. So we're quite excited to see what data comes out of this program towards the end of this year, and we'll be, of course, sharing that with the market as soon as we have it. Just a few words to conclude on our company. So we are listed on both ASX and NASDAQ. We, as of 31st of December, which is our last financial statements, we had about $11.6 million Australian in current assets, including some receivables and some equity holdings. And you can see our share price chart on the left here. Those that are looking it up right now on ComSec or whatever will be aware that the share price has bounced around a little bit in the last couple of weeks. And part of the reason for this is we've had one of our holders has unwound a little bit of stock in the market. He's only got about 3%, but it's enough for companies like this to move the share price up and down a little bit. What I would say to anybody who's looking at a biotech company as an investment is that success for a biotech company is driven by the outcome of clinical trials. If our drug fundamentally works, then our company is likely to be worth some significant premium on its current value. And if it doesn't work, very candidly, it's likely to be worth somewhat less. And investing in any biotech company is always really a bet on that outcome, and everything in between is noise. So what I would suggest to you as you look at any biotech company over the next couple of days is to ask yourself, what is the likelihood that at least one of the 4 clinical trials I just described hits a good result, because that's really what it's all about. And then just in the interest of time, I'm just going to flick ahead and just say finally that there are other companies working in our space. I've shown here a couple of examples from the United States of companies that are working in the field of PI3K inhibition. None of them, as I say, will ever be a brain cancer drug because they can't cross the blood-brain barrier. But I think the sort of market caps you see there help to illustrate the value that the market can attach to companies working in this kind of field when they're able to deliver results, when they're able to report successful data. And this certainly sets the kind of aspiration for our company. So in conclusion, I just say once again, the key things I'd love everybody to take away from today are that Kazia is focused on brain cancer, 4 clinical trials, all active in the US, all with some of the premier hospitals in the world in this disease, all of them generating data in real time, and a drug that has come out of the very, very best in the business with a fantastic pedigree. We think we've got a great shot to make a difference for these patients, and we'd love to have you join us as investors on that journey. Thank you very much indeed.